And we welcome you to episode 7 of the second season of Exit Philosophy. I'm Scott MacArthur. He is Rich Griffin, and I should probably better pronounce the F's in his name because it's not Griffin. So you see, I miss a week, and then all of a sudden, the words don't come.
I was going to say, welcome back. Yeah, it's not much has happened in the week that you missed, so, but we'll discuss that when we start off here.
Griff, you could have said, you didn't need to say welcome back. You could have said Vogelbach.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll get into
we'll get into all of that. Anyway, so it's great to be back. Just off dealing with some personal stuff. A friend who's going through a bit of a challenge right now and needed some of my attention, and was happy to do that. And so thank you to Keegan Matheson for filling in last week. We are back in the saddle, and as we sit here and record this, it is Wednesday afternoon, February the 21st, almost 2 o'clock Atlantic time, almost 1 o'clock Eastern time, where Griff is. And, you know, Rich, the Jays are sort of plugging and playing depth pieces now, negative WAR players from last year coming in on minor league contracts with invites to spring training, Daniel Vogelbach, Eduardo Escobar. And with a hat tip to our good buddy Mike Wilner, who hosts the Deep Left Field podcast, Mike spoke to Bo Bichette, who has been making the media rounds. I mean, this is the time of year to do it too, right? Position players are reporting to spring training, and there are media availabilities. But like, Bo was on with Blair and Barker about a month ago, and was on with Wilner just a few days ago. And Bo's theme on both of those shows, about a month apart, in my view, is an attempt to set the tone for what he hopes, and I think a lot of us observers hope, will be a new level of expectation for this team. Bo talked to Blair and Barker about the need to grow up. We're grown now. We're not kids. Now, in certain ways they are. You know, Bo's turning 26 this year. Vladdy's into his age 25 season. They're still very young human beings. But in terms of experience at the major league level, and when you consider that their free agency window opens 2 years from now, if they neither do long-term deals with the Blue Jays, they are players with significant experience. And the quote that stands out among the few that he gave to Mike Wilner on the Deep Left Field podcast: we need to hold each other accountable. We need to have a standard here. Amen. Amen. Because, as we've discussed, Griff, if this Blue Jays team is going to be a playoff team this year and is going to be considered a serious World Series contender, I'm not talking about late February, early March. The hype machine is in overdrive
everywhere.
The team is pumping out its content. The hype machine that's owned by the same company that owns the Blue Jays is telling us how great everything is going to be. If this team is going to be a legitimate World Series contender, it needs better seasons from its players who were here last year than it got in 2023, and in some cases needs significantly better seasons. So Bo is speaking up now as an almost 26-year-old, saying, we've run out of time here on the excuses.
Yeah, I mean, Bichette and Guerrero Jr. have both been here since 2019, so they are the veteran group, even though, as you point out, age-wise, they're still young men. I'm always amazed as I get older how people say, well, at 30, he's entering the second half or the downside of his career. I can't see that at all. But here we got a 25-year-old and a 26-year-old as they play this year, who have been here as long as anyone, 2019, before the pandemic. And they're getting it. As you point out, Bo is getting it. I've been through that clubhouse when there's no media there. I've been through that clubhouse and seen Bo sitting in front of his locker, observing. He looks around that room and he sees guys clowning, and he sees witty repartee and not so witty repartee. and he never changes. He just takes it all in. He's a sponge. He looks, and he is going to be that leader moving forward. Not Justin Turner, who might provide some veteran input and advice, but in terms of leaders in that clubhouse, Bo is going to be that guy because he's been there that long. You point to the fact that they have to take accountability, that they're not kids anymore. I blame the front office for babying them. I've been in front offices and managers' offices like Dick Williams. He would always point out that when a player had failed, and that's even before talking to a player. You can't do that anymore, but they try and make excuses. Vlad gets picked off second base at a big moment in a playoff game, and there's nobody saying that's the dumbest base running that could have possibly happened and taken us out of the next round and the possibility. There's nobody saying that. They're saying, well, he's young and he got tricked. There's no tricking involved. It's focus, it's concentration, it's the ability to be a winner at clutch time. And this is what Bo's talking about. And the front office has protected them for too long. The front office and the manager's office have to, if the players are willing to be accountable inside that clubhouse, then they have to be held accountable outside the clubhouse, because fans are tired of it. Fans are tired of hearing that it wasn't their fault, that there's nothing they could have done. Yes, there is. And hopefully in 2024, Bo will lead the way to accountability, much needed accountability.
Yeah. And there are projection models that like this Blue Jays team better than I do. And quite frankly, Griff, I hope those projection models are right, because that would mean the Blue Jays are at the very least a playoff contender, and you would expect them to be anyway, because half the league makes the playoffs now, right? I mean, there's no excuse. There's no excuse to not be a playoff contender.
Right. But the point that I laugh about is that you have maybe 30 teams saying we're better, we've had a good offseason, we're better than we were, we're going to be better than we were. Yet at the end of the season, Major League Baseball always finishes at 500. They win as many as they lose. So if teams are going to win more than they won last year, there's got to be as many teams losing more than they did last year. And so, like, you can't even pay attention to what's coming out of Major League camps. And if you look at the Blue Jays right now, what have they done to improve position-wise? They're counting, and we've talked about it before, Scotty, is they've talked about counting on improvement, counting on Don Mattingly sort of leaping feet first into that role of providing plans, better game plans, of guys losing weight and becoming all of a sudden better, like Manoah having a better year, Vlad having a better year, Alejandro Kirk having a better year. I don't think that can be a given, because there's 30 camps saying exactly the same thing about their underachieving players from a year ago, and it's not going to happen everywhere. When you look objectively at the Blue Jays, Justin Turner has been a good addition above and beyond what they had, but I mean, you got Matt Chapman, Whit Merrifield, and Brandon Belt. And who have they been replaced by? They've been replaced by similar players that really don't bump the expectations of this team for 2024. The only guy who does is Justin Turner. He's 39 years old.
Yeah, like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. last year was worth fewer than 2 wins above replacement, according to Baseball Reference. That's got to bump to 5 minimum, preferably 6, right? And Dalton Varsho, okay, there's some pop in that bat. There's some pop. We're not talking about a 40 home run year guy, a 40 home run a year guy, unless something drastic gets unlocked this season. But this is a player who's been a major league player long enough now that we can say he is a low on base potentially good to high slug guy. Now, if he's on base 34% of the time this year in his age 27 season, then maybe he's turned a corner in an area that he has yet to this point. And we leave open the wiggle room and the possibility for that. But guys are sort of now at a point where they are who they are. It's not that you ever stop evolving, but as you get into your later 20s, there's as much consequential data that has been put together behind you now as there will be consequential data going forward. If you're 27 or 28 years old, you've got about 6 or 7 potentially good seasons left, having had quite likely 5, 6, or 7 seasons behind you. So I'm open to the possibility of certain guys doing things that they haven't done before. But this idea that Dalton Varsho is just suddenly going to be, your 5 hitter who you can count on and who you don't need to pinch hit for when lefties come into the game. I'm open-minded, but I got to see it. I have to see it. And so you need better WAR seasons offensively from Vladdy, from Varsho. Kirk has got to bounce back. The list goes on.
I think at the end of the season, at the end of the 23 season, the front office was talking about free agency and trades to improve the lineup, to improve the offense. And I think they were sincere in talking about that. But now, after what has happened, and it's now 3 days away from the first Grapefruit League game, first exhibition game at spring training, now is when they're all of a sudden pushing the idea that the players that are coming back are going to be better than they were last year because a couple of guys lost weight, looked great, and a couple of guys underachieved, and now they're going to get back or overachieve. Like even their own internal game plan has changed because of the failure to lure Ohtani. The failure to get the Japanese ace pitcher that was available, and for some reason, the failure to sign any of the free agent DH power hitting right-handed or left-handed hitting guys out there like Cody Bellinger or JD Martinez or Jorge Soler.
They got Turner, but yeah.
Yeah. But the plan has changed, and now they're relying on something that they can't promise. I mean, they can hope that all of these guys that they're counting on for bounce backs do bounce back. And the other thing they're counting on is that they do have the deepest rotation and the deepest bullpen, maybe the best pitching staff in the American League.
Yeah, and knock on wood, and the table I'm leaning on here is made of wood, so I don't even have to pretend. That starting staff maintains its health. And, Alek Manoah is another guy who physically looks great right now. I mean, the photos and videos of him are starting to come out, and you and I have both been clear on Alek Manoah. I find his first 2.5 seasons to be fascinating. I'm not sure you could have ascended outside of winning the Cy Young Award. I'm not sure you could have ascended a higher peak than Alek Manoah did. And relative to that, I'm not sure you could have descended into a deeper valley than he did last season. So if he bounces back, Griff, and finds some kind of happy medium that's sort of above mid-range there, like he's more 2022 than 2023, but he doesn't have, not by too much, but he's just kind of fine, slots in there. It could be a great potential bounce back story. I haven't given up on him at all.
I was never of the mind that inside the clubhouse there were players that were upset with Alek Manoah for bailing on the team, for seemingly walking away from the table when they needed him to bounce back last season. I was never of the mind that it was a problem inside the clubhouse, because the clubhouse is always going to side with the player and the union against the team. They're not going to go, oh, Ross, you were so right about Alec. He's being a kid and he should grow up and he's letting us down. That was never going to be the case. And I think it's obvious from watching the footage and seeing interviews with Manoah and other players about Alec Manoah that is not going to be a problem. And now it's completely up to him and Pete Walker and others to find what they had when he was sitting in among the top 3 for Cy Young in that 22 season. I think 23 was for Alec Manoah. I don't think enough is spoken about with the rule changes and a kid still trying to find himself, now having to adjust to a pitch clock and to all the other factors that came into play, throwing over and thinking that he's smarter and he's trying to imitate Chris Bassett in terms of how to use the pitch clock, and Bassett has much more experience. I think that whole thing snowballed into something that he couldn't handle. And if he comes to spring training with the same attitude or with a correct attitude and with the support of his fellow Blue Jays, that I think, like you, I think he should be all right. I think he will be all right.
Yeah, pitching and defense, man, if they can hold up that end of the fort, and they, as one would expect they would, provided there's health, then it's, Vladdy being a 6 WAR player instead of a 1.5 WAR player. It's Bo Bichette doing his thing, and staying healthy. It's George Springer. The projections on Springer are interesting, because I just, with no disrespect to George Springer, it's an age thing. Like, I just don't see that ascending.
Yeah. I mean, it's an age and how hard you play and how many walls you run into and how many dives you make that are awkward and eat into your 34-year-old body. I think he's 33, 34.
In his better offensive seasons with the Jays, the first 2, he had health challenges. And then in his better health season last year with the Jays, he wasn't a very good hitter. So we'll see how it all plays out here, Griff. But if he is not the leadoff hitter for this team, they need to come to terms with that. And more importantly, he needs to come to terms with that and move him out of that one spot quick.
I was gonna say that that's one thing that they have to do this spring. They can't have a guy that they're worried about. He plays so hard, and then you bat him leadoff for 140 games, and you expect him maybe not to play so hard. That's counterproductive. So why not just move him down and make him comfortable in the 5-hole, where he can drive in runs, where he doesn't have to run the bases so much, where his late career talents can be maximized. Nothing said when he became a really good leadoff hitter that he had to be there the rest of his career. He's done remarkable things in the leadoff role. He's got a number of leadoff home runs that are right up there with the all-time greats. But now is the time, if the Blue Jays want to better their 89 wins of a year ago, that they have to figure things out to the maximum. And I don't think that him being in that leadoff spot for 140 games, and 140 is being generous, that's the best thing for this team. Now, the thing would be to find who is better in a leadoff role moving forward, because they don't really have an ideal guy in camp right now that we can see.
Yeah. And who knows where this is all going to be in about 5 or 6 weeks from now, Griff, because we can sit here and say how many roster spots are truly open and available, right? I mean, their pitching staff theoretically is set. Now, could be trades, could be.
Yeah, they might have 2 or 3 extra major league experienced pitchers that need to be dispersed somewhere else, whether it's Buffalo or in a trade. But yeah, the pitching staff is pretty much set. There's no doubt.
You got your first baseman, you got your shortstop, you got your 2 catchers, you got your left fielder, your center fielder, and your right fielder. You've got a bunch of people.
You got your DH. So you got 3 spots available
Right.
3 bench spots available because your catcher is one of the 4. Your
Right.
second catcher is one of the 4. So you got 3 spots available, which is the only reason that spring training pretty much is taking place, other than
And
getting.
I skipped over second and third intentionally, but
Right.
there are players who are going to make the team who fill those spots, the Kiner Falefas of the world, the Bigiots of the world, and we know that both of them can go to the outfield if needed. Davis Schneider is looking for a regular opportunity. Santiago Espinal, until he's not here, he's here.
Yeah.
Right. So there's just a lot of people.
So in my listing of needing of only being 3 spots available, I was not including Kiner Falefa or Biggio because I consider them on the team.
Right.
So that left 3 bench spots among all those, Ernie Clement. You got Davis Schneider. I don't think has a spot locked up. We got all those guys and then we got,
as I said,
Espinal, I think is going to be still involved in the trade because if you're looking for a backup shortstop, IKF can fill that role. He played 2 full seasons, one in Texas and one with the Yankees as their everyday shortstop. And one of the reasons that Espinal was there was because he was one of the few bench players that could play shortstop. Now you've got a guy who can. And so you don't want Kiner Falefa as your starting second baseman or your starting third baseman because you'd have to take him out of there and move him to shortstop. He should be the ultimate Whit Merrifield bench player. He should start a fair number of games at second base. He should play left field when you've got either Kiermaier or Varsho needing to sit, which happened a lot last year. You didn't want 2 left-handers facing an opposition left-hander. So it was always a case of Merrifield going to left field or the rest of the time playing second base or being on the bench. And this is exactly the role that Kiner Falefa can fill. Plus, he can play shortstop, which Merrifield could not.
Yeah. So just shout out to Bo for setting the tone in a couple of different media outlets that things need to change on that front this year. And look, what Bo exactly means, Griff, we are not the fun police here. Like I'm totally shoulder shrugged about the whole home run jacket thing. Like it didn't bother me when they had it. It didn't bother me that it wasn't there anymore last year.
It started a trend. It started a trend of home run celebrations,
right,
involving props.
Yeah, the Viking stuff and
then the Blue Jays backed away from the table. All of a sudden,
right. So I'm not talking about that, and I don't even think I'm necessarily talking about not getting out of the batter's box quickly when you think you've hit a home run and then it smacks off the upper half of the wall and you're standing on first.
Yeah,
that's just generally bothers me. Doesn't matter who does it, playing for what team, but we also understand it's a 162 game season and you're up to bat 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a game. Like it's never going to go entirely perfectly and you're going to lapse every now and then. But I just think there's an entire sort of vibe,
however,
general expectation Bo is trying to set.
Right. However, to your point, if a ball bounces off the top of the fence and you're still standing at home plate, my feeling is that the manager, without talking to that player, should be able to go into the post-game media session and call him out for that without going, oh, I might offend him. Screw that. This guy's in the major leagues. He's leading he's supposed to be one of the leaders on your team. And there's no reason, you're not saving yourself. You're just showboating when you watch a ball that you think is out. Unless it's 30 rows up in the bleachers, you should be leaving the box as you watch that ball go.
Yeah. And like, you're also, it isn't just the player involved that
but call him out.
Criticize, like the play of the player involved that you're criticizing. It's that the other 25 guys in your room are listening too. And they're all sitting around knowing that that was completely unacceptable. And you can't concern yourself with the reaction of certain segments of the fan base. There were people trying to explain away Vladdy getting picked off a second base in game 2 against the Twins. Well, here's what he might have been thinking, or it was loud in the stadium, or, whatever. Like, there are always going to be people who just don't think that there is a baseball is hard crowd out there. Baseball's hard. So, yeah, I mean, I know you thought you had a really good team this year that played sort of not great, but baseball's hard. Well, you know who baseball's also hard for? The Texas Rangers. It was particularly hard for the Texas Rangers 2 years ago when they were losing 100 games. Baseball's hard for the Arizona Diamondbacks, but they went to the World Series. Baseball is hard. Yes, it's one big Viagra pill. It's difficult. It's hard. But so every team has a level of expectations, and some don't meet them. And aw shucks, dems the breaks, in good enough. This is year 9 for this front office. Your almost 26-year-old as we sit here, because Bo's birthday is the first week of March. Your almost 26-year-old superstar is essentially, in a very positive way, saying enough's enough. Like, this, it's clear. It's clear that it has not been good enough. There's no need to just shrug that off now. Expectations are changing. The shortstop's announcing it.
I also think, further to what you're talking about, that there's not a need in my mind to separate Bo from Vlad and say, okay, if you can only sign one of these guys to a long-term deal, it's Bo because he's showing leadership. I think you have to sign it, and this goes back to discussions we've had before. You have to sign both those guys to long-term contracts. You didn't get Ohtani for $700 million, and you can sign both these guys for far less, both of them for the next 10 years for far less than $700 million. So your two cornerstone players you can sign for less than you were reaching out for a DH who may never pitch again, which I think was a good move that it didn't happen, that he went to the Dodgers. I don't think his value here, other than to Rogers Communications, and Lord knows we're all cheering for Rogers to make more money than they've ever made before. But in terms of baseball, I think signing Bo and Vlad to long-term deals would be better for the organization and the product and the stadium and the fans than having signed Ohtani to that money for 10 years.
So I can't tell, Griff, because I can only see you from really the tip of the microphone up. But are you on the edge of your seat? Are you sitting on the edge of your seat right now?
Far from.
I honestly, I can't tell.
I'm trying to get as far back on this seat as I can.
Okay.
Are you on
what?
yours?
I'm far back on my seat as well. I am not on the edge of my seat waiting for Cody Bellinger to sign a contract. I am not on the edge of my seat waiting for Matt Chapman to sign a contract. I am not on the edge of my seat waiting for Blake Snell to sign a contract. I have gone on about this, and you want to hone in on the agent involved, and I think that that's a great talking point given where things are in this sport, and we've detailed regional sports networks, etc., in some previous episodes, but happy to get back into that as it fits into the context of this conversation. I am not living on social media nearly as much as I used to, and by that, I should acknowledge I'm pretty much not on it. So I don't know the vibe and I'm realizing now that when we live in that world, we just assume everybody's thinking that. So I'm coming at this from a little bit of a further away lens, Griff. Baseball's lost the plot. You may want to argue with Scott Boras. I'm down to hear your theory on this. But like the National Hockey League, Canada Day, we can all strap in for 48 hours and watch all of the free agents end up somewhere, and then it's summer vacation time. The National Football League's calendar flips in about 3 weeks in mid-March, and all of the free agents are going, consequential free agents for sure, are going to sign within 2 or 3 days of the new league year when free agency begins. Baseball is right back to where it was 5 years ago, and I use my own personal story of standing in that scrum in Clearwater when Bryce Harper arrived at what I think was then Bright House Field. I believe the name has changed, but the Phillies home stadium in spring training home stadium in Clearwater. And I was one of many in that scrum, just because the Jays happened to be there that day. Let me know, Cody, Mr. Boris, let me know. Let me know when, and let me know with who. Blake, same deal. Chapman, same deal. When you sign, let me know. I am not anticipating this. You have lost my interest. Go sign with a baseball team, show up in training camp, and get ready for the season. This is not a hot stove. This is an oven from the 1960s that lost its heat 45 years ago and would not power up again if you updated it with all of the latest technology. You've lost the plot. It's not good for the entertainment aspect and therefore the business of this sport.
Well, I agree with you on the Cody Bellinger signing or any of the guys that are out there now. Baseball is now poaching on its own news cycle. When you talk about Canada Day in the NHL or the NFL and their well-planned progression of dates where something is happening to attract attention to the NFL, the attention is already on Major League Baseball. They're all at spring training. So signing another player, no matter how good he is, no matter how much money he's making, thanks to Scott Boras, isn't going to attract the eyes that it would if it happened at the winter meetings. And we've spoken about that. And I don't think there needs to be a deadline for free agent signing. I think there needs to be a deadline for trades so that GMs, once that deadline for trades passes, they realize that, hey, we have a need. Now we're going to have to go out to free agency and look at signing one of those guys that are out there because we can't make a trade anymore. I think Scott Boras, that's one of the few things that he had right when he said the deadline would become a death line for free agency. I think that it doesn't make any sense. The players union would never accept that. But with a trade deadline, you're dealing players that already are guaranteed money. They just don't know where they'll be playing and they exchange uniforms and that's it. Makes much more sense. I think Scott Boras needs to change his tactics. I mean, he's left, there are 10 out of the top 50 free agents still available to sign. 5 of them are Scott Boras clients. And his strong arming of GMs through the years is not working anymore because there's less money out there because of the collapse of the regional sports networks that we've also spoken about on the exit philosophy. So until he comes to grips with reality, Scott Boras, his clients will not come to terms with free agent contracts. And he needs to realize that this might be a transitional year. Hopefully it is, where we all know that teams are more valuing their own young players, their own young star players. You look at Bobby Witt Jr. and he signs this huge deal, this mega deal, and he's not even close to free agency. Scott Boras's idea is that I will take my players to free agency and then there'll be a bidding war. And then I'll take the best offer, even if it goes into the new year before spring training. Well, obviously, that's not working. Obviously, the best young players are being valued by their own teams, and they are signing them to those mega deals long before they reach free agency. And so these guys that are going to free agency, like Matt Chapman and JD Martinez and Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery, they all have warts. They're not going to get the contracts that they're looking at. So hopefully Boras realizes that and becomes more so in tune with the reality of baseball and money and the money available. And that this is the last time that we see this where we're going into the Grapefruit League and Cactus League season of exhibition games, and there's still some of the top free agents out there without a job.
Like, and I'm asking you to speculate, Griff, so you can say I have no idea. And what's he even saying to it? What's he even saying to his clients? Like, how is it? Like, I just would have to think as we sit here on the 21st of February that Blake Snell's on the phone with somebody from the Boris Corporation every day. Matt Chapman, Jordan Montgomery, JD Martinez, all of these big name. Cody Bellinger's at the top of the list, right? Of available free agents. I mean, there's daily communication. There's probably close to daily communication through most of the offseason anyway, but now it's, so where are we at here? And everybody's been reporting on this stare down between the Cubs and Boris over Bellinger. Like, what are we staring down? Are we talking about 25 mil a year instead of 27? Are we staring down 23 rather than 25? Like,
I think it's pretty much coming down to an ego thing with Scott Boras. I think that he does not want to take a step backwards or admit that he's wrong. I think his client list may be the MAGA of baseball, where they believe everything that's told to them about the bad clubs and organizations that won't fork over money that they have. And I think I'm not saying that it's a cult of Scott Boras, but if you look at the list and look at the recent history, maybe it is. He comes to the winter meetings, and his media throng has obviously been tipped off, and he gives his state of the game. He throws out his one-liners. He believes he's funny, and he's not. And
it's gotten worse too.
Yeah, it's gotten worse. But his wardrobe is always impeccable, and he has a huge ego and belief that he represents all players, that the salaries that he brings in trickle down to everyone else. So like he's a messiah, which he's not.
And I have stood in, I was probably the second, third, or fourth wave. I can't even remember, Griff, but we've talked about Scott Boras's media availability annually at the winter meetings. They now set up the Boris Corporation backdrop. And
yeah,
I mean, you're almost half expecting, and I probably shouldn't drop this name given everything that's gone on, but it's almost like you're expecting Mr. McMahon's No Chance in Hell theme music to blare over the hotel speakers and watch this Boris guy power walk in and then just set himself up in front of the banner and wave after wave after wave after wave of media just throw him questions, and then he pitches these one-liners. And I've been in them. So I am not claiming to be on higher ground, but wouldn't it just be a thing if that whole act next year was met with nothing?
Yeah, I think he's
that there was nobody there to see him.
He's smart enough that he's going to have to change his strategy, and it's a tough lesson for him. But you look, he's got 17, not just the top 5 of the top 10, 5 of the top 50 free agents left unsigned, and 5 of the 10 that are of the top 50 unsigned. But I mean, he's got decisions that he's made, like Hyunjin Ryu going to Korea and signing a 4-year deal because he's a Boris client. And to me, Scott Boras has other big name pitchers that he has to find jobs for. So his advice to Hyunjin would have been, hey, why don't you go back to Korea? I can get you a $12.4 million deal for 4 years, without out loud saying that he's got Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery still looking for jobs and ahead of Ryu in the line. So and then Eric Hosmer, who is a World Series winner, announced his retirement on Wednesday, and he was a Boris client, a free agent. He's made a lot of money and he doesn't need to play anymore. But like, if I was 20th on the Scott Boras depth chart right now. I would be concerned about where I'll be playing in 2024. And so hopefully he sees the light and changes his methods, and baseball can work with him and with the Players Association and steal away some of that off-season thunder that they've lost with the way that they've sort of mishandled the winter meetings and other opportunities. And moving forward, we'll get back to something that is better for the game of baseball.
Like I always consider myself pro player. I want guys to get their market value and to get what they're worth and to squeeze every dollar out of these franchises, Griff. But I also understand that, a big part of sports business is entertainment. And I feel like they thought they had solved some of the off-season's problems with the last CBA. And there have been a lot of weird things, right? COVID screwed a lot of stuff up, kind of messed up financial projections. And, there was an entire season where in most stadiums there were no fans in the stands. And there's that. And then there's the RSNs, which you touched on. Like there's a lot of stuff that has come up that wasn't predictable.
And there's cutting back to 4 farm teams per
Right.
organization, plus the
Yeah.
complex league, plus maybe a team in the Dominican Summer League. So that's created fewer jobs in baseball, which has a trickle up effect to the top free agents. Like if you don't need all those players, you look at the free agent list on Major League Trade Rumors. You look at the list, you could form 3 more Major League teams and they could be competitive, but you could form 3 more teams of veteran Major League players that are still out there and that aren't spoken about. So yeah, it's not working the way it is now and needs to change. And it's all part of what's happened since COVID in terms of changing the ground rules, changing the economies of organizations, changing the way that games are viewed, streaming or cable or whatever. And it's an adjustment period, and baseball better come to grips with it and figure it out in a hurry.
So how about Mike Trout giving his introductory press scrum out there in Arizona as Angels camp opens? And he's asked, have you ever thought about asking for a trade? Because as we know, the Angels are just living on the border of dysfunction. And maybe long ago crossed it with love for our buddy Perry Manassian, but I mean, when you're working for that owner, what chance do you have? And Mike Trout's like, no, I want to win a championship here. It would be easy to ask for a trade. I want to win a championship here. He wants to be an LA Angel. Publicly, he's stating that. Anthony Rendon, who has played approximately 2.5 games since signing essentially a $250 million contract with the Angels before the 2020 season, after winning the World Series with the 2019 Washington Nationals, was asked about where baseball sort of ranks in his life, and he started talking about how, well, my faith and my family are big, and baseball's just kind of a job, and I do it. And the reporter quite correctly leaned in on that, and Rendon got a little defensive and didn't want to further delve into that question. But now it's leading to a lot of comments and a lot of memes about the fact that, hey, Anthony Rendon just, I don't know, does he even like his job? I mean, he probably likes the paychecks because he's in the middle of a $250 million contract with the LA Angels. But just juxtaposing Trout saying, I want to stay in Anaheim, figure this out, and win a championship here, with Anthony Rendon going, yeah, like baseball's just a thing I do. I just happen to be good at it, and so I play it, and it doesn't really matter to me. I'll just say this, Griff. That is not. I think if I'm going to give Rendon any leash, I think what he's trying to say is, look, when I go home at night and I tuck my kids in, that's the most important thing in my life. I'm good with that. It's just when you consider what he hasn't done for the LA Angels, which is a whole lot more than what he has done in his time there, and with what they pay him, it is an egregiously bad look. And if you don't give a crap, if you really don't give a crap, if the interpretation is correct that he doesn't give a crap, then really walk the walk while talking the talk. Walk away from the rest of your guaranteed money. If it ain't working for you anymore, walk away. Walk away from all of it. Other people have done it in their lives. If it ain't working, if it's broke, fix it. Walk away. It's just again, I want to give this guy some grace because I think I know what he was trying to say. It just did not come off good at all.
Scotty, I've been 26 years in Major League Baseball media, 25 years, or the other way around, 25 years in media relations and PR. And on neither side would I support anything that he said at spring training this year. The fact that it's just a job. I mean, we always want players to speak the truth, athletes to speak the truth in any sport. If this is the truth, then like you said, just leave.
Walk away.
Nobody's forcing you to play. If your family is that important, I'm sure that you got enough money left over from the first 4 years of that contract to be comfortable the rest of your life. If you're just,
that's what you made in Washington before that.
Right. And there's the thing. I think fans, it's unacceptable what he said in terms of expectations from a fan base. But if he had played his first 6 years leading into free agency in Anaheim, and then 4 years into his big contract, he said all these things about it's just a job, my family's important, blah, blah, blah. I think it would be more acceptable than spending the first 6 years in another organization with the Nationals, winning a World Series there, then coming over and playing 200 games in 4 full seasons. That's 50 games per season and hitting 22 home runs total. I mean, he makes Albert Pujols' contribution look like Babe Ruth, you know?
Yeah.
But like if his whole career had been in the one spot, you could see a little more acceptance of what he's saying. But coming in, taking the money, forcing fans to come and look for him, and he's not playing because he's hurt again, and then saying this stuff heading into spring training where there's sort of expectations are low. I think that's one of the teams that's not really expecting to be better than they were last season. That's ridiculous. As you said, just walk away if that's how you feel.
I just
spend more time with your kids.
You know, I think Griff, I think like he could have said something like, you know what, it's been a really tough 4 years here. I haven't been healthy and I want to bounce back this year. And, you know, we don't have Shohei anymore. We got a hole in our lineup. And if I'm healthy, I feel like I can fill it. And, you know, one of the things in life that is really, as I've gotten older and gotten married and started to have kids, one of the things that's really grounded me is the fact that I can go home at night and tuck my kids into bed and wake up in the morning and be with them for breakfast, drive them to school. And that's really helped balance me, you know, from a high pressure work environment where I'm making a lot of money, but I'm not really contributing. And my family grounds me. My family keeps me centered. Like if he said stuff like that, then he's not just, you know, he's not just sort of revealing a part of himself. He's actually, well, we've got a wonderful family man here. But exactly. The I don't give a crap act.
Exactly what you said is what the PR person if that was me, or I mean, you qualify after that speech you just gave of what he should have said and how he should have handled it. And even after he said that, I would have taken him aside, sat down one-on-one and gone over exactly what you said, what you talked about, how he should have handled it, so that moving forward, he can sort of very quietly sort of wend his way back into the good graces of the fans. It's going to take a big effort for him. And it's something that maybe as a PR person, if you had seen in advance, if you had been able to detect that this might be coming, you could have given him that talk before he faced the media. But in either case, he can't go down that road any further, and he cannot confront a writer who tries to follow up on a question and go, so let me get this straight. This is just a job. And when did that become? And he gets his back up and he wants to fight. That is not going to help the situation.
So you mean you don't want to be here right now? Like, not in this scrum, because most players never want to be in the scrum, but
Right.
here at camp.
Right.
At camp, you don't want to be here. You'd never hear that, Griff, from a football player in the NFL, because they're scratching and clawing for guaranteed money all the time.
Yep.
You know, and I am pro guaranteed money. I'm not saying that baseball should take on some kind of NFL approach to contracts, but when your money is locked in, he could blow a wheel again this year and never come back, and he'd get paid out for, what was it, a 7-year contract? He'd get 3 more years at whatever 245 divided by the 7 is. And that's more. And this is the other thing. I mean, without getting into the whole socioeconomic problem in our culture, most people are living paycheck to paycheck. Most people are just paying their bills and stashing a little bit aside while covering their expenses. And it might be a thing for a family of 4 to get to 1 or 2 Angels games a year. And now you got this guy making $1 gazillion saying, when you come watch me play, I don't really want to be here.
Scotty, you know who the best, I mean, you were just mentioning the league, the NFL. You know who the best interviews in all of professional sports are? Is NFL and CFL offensive linemen. Yeah. They're the best interviews you can get, because there's never a big crowd around them. They're thoughtful about the game and their position. They know they're never going to, no matter how well they perform, they're never going to go into that mega salary bracket. And they're observers, you know. It's like when I see Bo Bichette sitting in front of his locker looking around the clubhouse and absorbing everything that's going on, I think of offensive linemen that I've interviewed, that I've seen walking into the Bills locker room or the Argonauts. So those are the players, and that's the attitude that players should have, not what Rendon showed. And by the way, we haven't talked since the Super Bowl. How about your Niners? Well, what's your impression of them moving forward?
You had to, eh?
Yeah, I had to.
You had to? Yeah.
Well, we're talking about offensive linemen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was a heartbreaker. And a few people have asked me since the Super Bowl, so would you rather get blown out in the Super Bowl or lose that way? And I said, I'd rather lose that way, because I want to play the 4 quarters, or in this case, the 5, believing my team has a chance to win it all the way through, rather than being down 4 touchdowns in the second quarter and just sort of the long funeral procession to the time expiry at the end of the 4th quarter. So it was heartbreaking. That Chiefs defense is elite. I've heard the players on the 49ers talk about it afterward, and I think it reflects kind of how the diehard fans like me feel about it, is that they left so much on the table in the first half. I remember thinking to myself early in the second quarter, we are absolutely dominating this game, and it's 0-0. That just isn't going to work, because in order in order to get Patrick Mahomes on the ground and not let him up, you need a 2 or a 3 score lead with just a couple minutes left, sort of deal, right? You can't be in a 1-score game, having left so much on the table. The McCaffrey fumble on the opening drive, I mean, we were gashing them. We were physically exerting our dominance, and then we put the ball on the ground when we're at worst case in field goal range.
Well, I think it was 4 days before the game when we recorded the last exit philosophy before the Super Bowl. You nailed the scenario. You said, you said, I got to cheer for my team. I'm not going to bet money on it. I'm going to cheer for the Niners because they're my team. I can see a scenario where San Francisco has a 3-point lead and the ball is in the hands of Mahomes, and he either does it or he doesn't, and usually he does it. And you nailed it. You had it exactly right. And the only thing that I didn't understand, and maybe you've heard, I mean, you listen to all their podcasts and post games and wrap ups, is like, why did they take the ball in overtime and set the bar for the Chiefs to jump over?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, they didn't know what the Chiefs were going to do, and we found out later that if, like, just pretend the Niners had scored a touchdown and kicked the extra point, they're up 7. Kansas City comes back, scores a touchdown. Kansas City was going to go for 2 to win the game if they converted it, and they would lose the game if they didn't. So, but you can't know that, right? So I think Kyle Shanahan came at it from a 2-pronged perspective. Number one, he said to himself, we got to go down and score. And then if we go down and score and Kansas City comes back and scores, now it's sudden death and we've got the ball. So we're going to have the first shot on offense in what at that point would be sudden death. Now, it didn't matter. The Niners kicked the field goal. Kansas City comes back, scores the touchdown. The game's over. The other part is that the Niners defense had been on the field as Kansas City drove to kick the game-tying field goal at the end of the fourth quarter. And I think they wanted to give their defense a blow. I think they felt that they needed to give the defense a blow. I was less fixated on the overtime decision with whether to take the ball or not than I was on the play calling in the third quarter, where I thought they completely abandoned the run game, which, you know, I mean, there are reasons, I suppose, for that. But to me, even if you're getting stuffed, you do need to stay with it consistently. And, of course, the Niners went back to running the football in the fourth quarter and moved the football. And they ran the football in overtime, and they were down inside the Chiefs' 5 with a chance to score a touchdown, and obviously had to settle for the field goal because they had a blown blocking assignment on the third down play. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, and it's so hard to get to these things. I know Kansas City has made it look easy. I know New England made it look easy for 20 years. When you get to a Super Bowl, you so badly want your team to win it for obvious reasons. You want to say that they're Super Bowl champions, but you just come to appreciate how difficult it is to get there and that there are no promises. You know, I remember 2019, Griff, they lost to the Chiefs. I felt real good about 2020. Well, what happened in 2020? First of all, COVID hit, which completely erased the spring programs and training camp as we knew it. And the 49ers played their second game of the season at MetLife Stadium, which has the worst turf in the league. Nick Bosa blows his ACL. Jimmy Garoppolo turns his ankle and is never the same for the rest of the season. And I remember thinking in week 2 of 2020, we're not going to defend our NFC championship. Our players are falling like flies here, you know, so it's so hard. Between
92 and 93, the Blue Jays made an amazing number of roster changes and moves in personnel. In the NFL, does that work, or you just go with what you got and draft and see if you can enhance through the draft and then roll it over again?
Yeah, you know, I think that most of their key players are under contract. Even Brandon Ayuk, who is their star receiver, is under contract for next year. Now, typically you don't let a player on his rookie contract play the final year, or the player doesn't want to, for sure, play the final year of his rookie contract without having some kind of extension hammered out, right? Because football is a non-guaranteed league. You blow your knee and you don't have the guaranteed money going forward on a second contract, that can end your career right there and you're out a lot of money. So they've got to address the Brandon Ayuk situation. But outside of that, they're pretty much everybody of significant consequence is coming back. They need to improve their offensive line. They need to sort of revamp the depth of their defensive line. And I'll say this, you know, the Trey Lance trade, Griff, where they traded those picks to get Trey Lance, you can't actually quantify it. You can't quantify it. But the 12th overall pick in 2021, which they traded to move up to 3 to take Trey Lance, the first round pick in 2022 and the first round pick in 2023, which both were included in that deal for Trey Lance, and Lance didn't work out. Those are human beings that don't exist on the 49ers team, right? Because they traded away those draft picks. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching the right side of the offensive line just get imploded, which was an issue at times all season. I'm thinking maybe there would have been a person, right? Maybe there would have been a person who they drafted with that 2022 or 2023 pick who, you know, might have stepped up in a moment. Maybe there would have been more D-line depth. Maybe there would have been this, that, the other thing if those picks. So the Trey Lance trade didn't work out. Brock Purdy saved them from the quarterbacking perspective for Lance not working out, but the actual human beings that those picks would have become would have been very useful to them. And it's just, that's life though, right?
Yeah. I think halftime may have ushered in a great finish to the game. And there's a couple of items here. I mean, well, that's enough about the Super Bowl, but and condolences to you for the outcome, but they played great. They dominated.
It was a great game. Yeah, it was a great game. Yeah, it'll be remembered.
2 baseball items before we close this episode. Vogelbach and Escobar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there's reasons, and I'm a great conspiracy guy. You know that.
You're not doing this again, are you?
Daniel Vogelbach?
I think I already know where this is going, but I will smile if you're watching on youtube.com/exit philosophy and looking at us. I will smile if this ends up going where I think it's going. Go ahead.
I am of the belief that Daniel Vogelbach, that no one in the Blue Jays front office believes that Daniel Vogelbach will make this 26-man roster on opening day. But Vogelbach's agency, ISE, also represents Danny Jansen, who is in negotiations with the Blue Jays. They are Danny Jansen's agency, and also Dalton Varshaw's agent. And I think that as a favor to Vogelbach and ISE, that the Blue Jays have invited Vogelbach to camp. We'll send him on bus rides to Bradenton to see his old friends. We'll have him get at bats in the 6th, 8th inning. We'll go on several more bus rides. We'll be showcased for 29 teams and their scouts, rather than sitting at home or working out at a high school or a college and not being seen by anybody. But it's a visibility thing for Daniel Vogelbach, only not visibility for a spot with the Blue Jays, but for a spot with 29 other teams as a favor to the agency. That's my theory on Vogelbach. With Escobar, I see him as he had a great year in 2019. So 5 years ago with the Diamondbacks, hit 38 home runs, 118 RBIs, was an all-star at third base as an everyday player. But it's 5 years later, and he's 35, 36 years old. I think that Escobar is an insurance policy rather than a roll of the dice. And not rolling the dice to see if he's got what he had in 2019. I think that he's there in case there's injuries, in case they find out that Justin Turner can't play as much third base as they were hoping he could play. In case they make a deal and package some of their middle infielders like Santiago Espinal or Davis Schneider. But he's there. He's there. He's going to play. Escobar is going to play third base and going to be a part of spring training, has more of a chance of making the team than Vogelbach, but I don't think he's being counted on. So it's two nice spring training additions, and moving forward, they will not be a significant part of this team. Vogelbach, not at all. I didn't see you smile. Did you smile?
I smiled. I smiled during the agency talk. I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah.
The second thing before we wrap up is that the Yankees seem to already be announcing that Marcus Stroman is going to pitch their home opener at Yankee Stadium, which I think is on April the 8th, and would line him up against Chris Bassett. That's something to look forward to, you know?
God, yeah.
And what are the odds that something happens to Stroman where he doesn't make that start? Do you think he's looking forward to that, or?
Yes, I probably, like everybody else, feel like I'm keenly aware that Marcus remembers things.
Yeah.
So I think throwing against,
I don't think he
old team.
remembers. I don't think he remembers what Brian Cashman said about him, because he loves Brian Cashman now. And that might mean that he loves Ross Atkins now, too. Who knows?
Well, if Ross Atkins is willing to pay him $35 million over 2 years, 2 years from now, I think he'll fall right back in love. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But no, look, I've
got it circled already.
When Stroman signed with the Yankees, I smiled, because I'm like, okay, this is good. Because now he's wearing the Evil Empire's jersey, the team for whom he's always wanted to pitch, which means we're going to, not as much as we would have after the schedule got more balanced, but we're going to see him more often than we would have when he was a Met or a Cub. He may have occasion to, hop off the mound, stare down a hitter that he strikes out in Rogers Center, and the diehard HDMH people are going to have a decision to make. Do we still love our guy? Or are we Blue Jays fans who loved the guy when he was a Blue Jay, and then we didn't care so much because he was in the National League, but now he's playing for a team that we're in total competition with for playoff seeding and all that? I think it's, again, entertainment, theater, more of it is good. And Marcus Stroman being in the AL East, pitching for the Yankees, is good.
I agree. And I actually like Stro. I mean, I've always liked him. We've had a misunderstanding or two, but I enjoy his talent. I enjoy watching him pitch, and I've got that game circled. It'll be great it'll be a great game to see, as we wrap up this edition, as will watching baseball on the weekend from Dunedin. I'm really looking forward to that. My heart's starting to, and I can't afford to have my heart beat too fast, because at my age, who knows?
Well, it's two things, right? It's the idea that baseball is back, and it's not quite all the way back because they're in their spring jerseys and they're going through their paces. But it's also, Griff, that it's that time of year now here where we are in Canada. You're in the Toronto area. I'm out in the Halifax area, where the days are legitimately, noticeably starting to get longer. If you're outside in the sun, it's still very cold, but the sun is noticeably stronger than it was in like early January. So you can start to sense spring even amid the winter weather. And then you're watching and you're like, oh yeah, there are still places where you can go and sit outside in a t-shirt. Yeah, we're not going to be frozen forever. So it's the signs of spring. It's the daily
The first
going
game,
to the
first
baseball
game in
season.
Florida is always my first sign of spring. And,
Oh yeah.
speaking of being back, it's great to have you back on Exit Philosophy after 1 week off, and we will pray for your friend that things turn out all right for her.
Thank you.
And this was great, and we're gonna do it again next week, maybe earlier in the week. But as for now, this has been episode 7, year 2,
episode 7 of season 2.
Season 2.
So just I'll sign us off by reminding you, griffsthepitch.com is where you can get all of Griff's work. So that's written. He's got great conversations with current and former Blue Jays, former Montreal Expos. You can get the Exit Philosophy podcast linked there as well. If you are listening to us, please know that we have a youtube.com/Exit Philosophy page. We post the video audio versions of our podcast there. We also will do some post-game live on select dates, and we'll make you aware of those well in advance, but we'll do that throughout the regular season. So stay with us. Baseball will be back by the time, and we will get back to our Monday recording schedule as well. So we'll do another one in 5 days here on Monday, February the 26th. And by then, Griff, we will have, we'll have something to talk about. Somebody was working on his curveball in that 5th inning this weekend, and we'll break that all down.
And what does that 2 home run game by Vogelbach mean?
It means that Danny Jansen's going to take a hometown discount because his agency loves the Blue Jays, right?
You never know. You never know. We'll talk again next week. Thank you for listening. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Scotty.